Good morning, everybody. If everybody can take a seat, we get started on our legislative committee for March 21, 2024. The CPA has provided an opportunity for the public to participate via web app platform. When we take public comments, we will begin by taking public comment from those individuals attending the meeting at the Sacramento location. I would then ask the moderator to open up the lines for public comment on WebEx. You will be allotted up to 5 minutes for public comment. Ms. Reed, could you take a roll for the committee?
Patricia Batchelor.
Present.
Nancy Dong. Present. Christian Lotta.
Present.
Tony Lin.
Present.
Katrina Salazar.
Here.
And Yin Tu.
Present.
We have a quorum.
Thank you, Ms. Reed. And Ms. Dong, welcome to our committee, your first meeting. Welcome.
Thank you so much. I'm really excited to be here.
Absolutely. So I would like to read the mission statement for the record. The CPA's mission is to protect consumer by ensuring only qualified licensors practice public accountancy in accordance with established professional standards. This mission is derived from the statutory requirement that protection of the public shall be the highest priority for the California Board of Accountancy in exercising its licensing, regulatory, and disciplinary functions. Whenever the protection of the public is inconsistent with other interests sought to be promoted, the protection of the public shall be permanent. All right, now we are going to our agenda item 1, public comment for item not on the agenda. Do I have any public comment from Sacramento location? Seeing none, Ms. Moderator, could you open up for WebEx for public comment?
Yes, this is the moderator. The Q&A is now open. The instructions are on the screen. If you would like to participate, click that question mark inside of the square, type comment, and make sure it goes to all panelists before clicking send. If you're calling in from a phone, dial *3 to raise your virtual hand. At this time, I see no request for public comment. Would you like me to close the Q&A?
Yes, please. Thank you, moderator. All right, we're moving on to item number 2, approval of minutes of the January 25th, 2024 Legislative Committee meeting. Any comment or motion to approve the minutes? Ms. Salas?
I'd like to make a motion to approve the minutes as presented.
Thank you. I see a second from Tony. And any comment from the committee members? I would like to open up the item to the public for Sacramento location. Seeing none, moderator, could you open up WebEx for comments?
Yes, the Q&A is now open. The instructions are on the screen. Again, click that question mark, type comment, send to all panelists, or press *3 from your phone to raise your virtual hand. At this time, I see no requests. Would you like me to close the Q&A?
Yes, thank you, moderator. All right, Ms. Reed, could you take the roll call for vote?
Patricia Batchelor.
Present.
Is it yes?
Oh, yes.
Oh, sorry. Sorry. Okay. Nancy Dong.
Abstain.
All right. Christian Lotta.
Yes.
Tony Lin.
Yes.
Katrina Salazar.
Yes.
And Yin Tu.
Staying.
The motion carries.
All right, thank you, Ms. Reed, for that. Item number 3, California Board of Accountancy 2024 Legislative Tracking Chart 2024 Legislative Calendar and Consideration for Taking Position on Legislation. This is a written report. We don't have any presentation. Any board member have any comments or questions? Seeing none. Any public in Sacramento location? Seeing none. Moderator, can you open up WebEx for comments?
Yes, the Q&A is open. The instructions are on the screen for your reference. If you would like to participate, click that question mark, type comment, send it to all panelists, or press *3 from your phone to raise your virtual hand. At this time, there are no requests. Would you like me to close the Q&A?
Yes, moderator, thank you so much. All right, now we're going to our next item, number 4, review and approval of responses to the questions on the Sunset Review background paper. And before I ask Mr. Hemphill to do his report, I must say again, compliment to staff, Dominic and also Ms. Salazar for the presentation at the Senate Rules.
All right. Thank you, Chair 2. Good morning, members. I am David Hemphill, Information and Planning Officer with the CBA. As Ms. Tu just said, it was just a little over a week ago on March 11, the CBA appeared before the legislature's Joint Sunset Review Committee, which was comprised of both the Assembly Business and Professions and the Senate Business, Professions and Economic Development Committees. CBA member Katrina Salazar and Executive Officer Dominic Franzella testified regarding the CBA's consumer protection mission, its regulatory oversight responsibilities, and highlighted some of our successes since the prior Sunset Review. And I will echo what Ms. Tu had to say. They did an excellent job in their testimonies. In advance of this hearing, the legislature prepared a background paper which contained 13 issues and a legislative staff recommendation on each one. This agenda item provides the opportunity for the LC to review and approve our proposed responses to the issues to be submitted back to the legislature in early April. The CBA's proposed responses are contained in the attachments to this agenda item, conveniently numbered as the same as the current issue. So when I'm referring to issue 1, we can be looking at attachment 1, which is going to make it very nice. I will briefly summarize each issue with its legislative staff recommendation individually, along with the proposed CBA response, and then open it up for feedback from the committee about our responses, whether you have suggested edits, whether you have new things to include. We would be open to all of that feedback. Are we ready? So let's start off with issue number 1, of course, also attachment number 1, the legislatively established committees. So this pertains to the removal of the Mobility Stakeholder Group, or MSG, from statute. Now, in the legislative staff recommendation, they also asked how the CBA verifies that licensure requirements in other states are at least as stringent as those in California. Our response states that when the present practice privilege or mobility provisions were established, proactive steps were taken to ensure that out-of-state licensees met minimum requirements for entry. The MSG considered whether the practice privilege provisions were consistent with the CBA's duty to protect the public. The MSG completed its legislative mandates and has not met since 2019. NASBA currently shares any state's potential deviation from substantial equivalency, allowing the CBA to stay informed on other states' requirements. The CBA believes it is well positioned to examine mobility issues in the future on its own, or through its Committee on Professional Conduct, or perhaps an ad hoc task force. We would like to add that the response as it currently is stated lacks that definitive statement that we recommend that the MSG would be eliminated. So that could be something with your approval that we would add into our response to that. So I will now turn it back to you. Are there any questions or comments from the committee members?
Any questions or comments? David, you can continue on.
To adding in a sentence saying that you do recommend that they discontinue the MSG group, because that was the sentence that I was looking for in the response, and I wasn't sure if you were thinking of including the scope as part of the CBA going forward, which sounds like that is the case and we have the capacity to do that, or if you're leaning towards getting more guidance from staff and as to how to approach this question. So I would think it's a good idea to include that last sentence.
Thank you for that feedback, Ms. Duong. We'll definitely include that in our response.
Anybody else? Seeing none, Mr. Hemhill,
Okay.
continue.
So issue number 2 regarding digital communications and documentation acceptance. So there's 2 parts to this issue. The first would allow the CBA to notify licensees of proposed regulatory changes via email rather than by mail. In the proposed response, we include information requested in the staff recommendation regarding allowing licensees to receive a hard copy notification of regulatory changes. Our proposed response also notes that an individual can presently request a hard copy of these proposed regulatory changes and that all these changes are posted on the CBA website. Eliminating the mailings would save the CBA approximately $70,000 per occasion, and the obvious benefit of the electronic notification arriving much faster. Now, the second part, the documentation acceptance, deals with how the CBA receives transcripts from students enrolled in dual degree programs, which often wait until the entire program is completed to confer both the bachelor's and master's degrees. The amendment would give the CBA flexibility to receive this educational evidence in hard copy or electronic format. Are there any comments or questions from the members about number 2?
Ms. Batchelor?
Yes, I have a question. The move is to have students start to email. Is that secure? I haven't seen transcripts in years. And I was wondering, is there any sensitive information that's on the transcripts? Because you know how things are now. Email can be hacked and different things like that. So versus the email, is a possibility for some type of secure way, like a secure file where students can upload information versus using email. Has that been considered?
I'll go ahead and I'll take that question, Michelle Center, Licensing Chief. So the process that we use is we review any provider that has requested to send us transcripts. Transcripts are not sent from the student. They're sent from a provider, such as Parchment would be one, National Clearinghouse would be another provider. Providers that would like to allow their transcripts to be sent to us electronically instead of in paper, we review their request. We ensure that there is a method for us to review the email that we receive to ensure it's authentic. For example, where it's from, are there some things that we should look for on that particular transcript to ensure it's authentic. Those providers have to adhere to specified law to ensure that they protect student privacy in their transmissions. So that is why it's important for us to use those providers instead of asking students to email documents directly to us.
Any other comment or questions? Mr. Hemhill, you can continue.
Okay, thank you. Moving on to issue number 3, which is focusing on preventing future committee vacancies to avoid quorum issues. Our proposed response lists the many ways the CBA has been actively conducting outreach to encourage qualified licensees to apply to become a committee member, and that we don't feel we need legislative assistance at this time. Are there any comments or questions about issue 3?
And, Ms. Batchelor?
I have a comment. When I joined this board, I had no idea that there were vacancies. I actually was I requested to be on the board of fiduciaries because I did get an email from them. And so then the government's office looked at it and they said, well, what about the Board of Accountancy? We think you'll be a better fit. So I said, well, sure. I didn't know that they had any vacancies. So all CPAs get these requests because it bypassed me.
It's not a request email that Ms. Batchelor is talking about. You're talking about on the website of CPA, right?
Well, this specific issue is regarding committee vacancies as opposed to the CBA itself.
Okay.
But we have sent, I believe it was 2 to 3 years ago, where we sent an email to our entire list of CPAs, just kind of making them aware of the fact that there were vacancies, and it was a link to our website, 4 pages. So that is one of the things we have done. And as you see in the attachment, there's the list from social media posts to the web page that we have, and videos that we've done. When Ms. Salazar was president last year, she did a couple videos about that specifically as well. So
Okay,
that-
thank you.
some of the things we're doing.
Yeah, and I have asked Cal CPA if they advertise the fact that they're all vacancy in CPA, and Mr. Fox has said to me that on a regular basis they do make sure people know from Cal CPA.
And we appreciate
Sounds
their
like
support
he said
for that.
that was a fair statement. So, all right, thank you. Anybody else? Comments? All right, continue on.
Just one question, actually. Are you
Ms.
checking to see whether the emails being sent out are being flagged as junk? And this goes back to the previous issue area number 2, where if you are replacing mailouts, which saves money, obviously, and better for the environment, too, with emails, how do you know it's going directly into somebody's inbox?
Unfortunately, at this time, we don't have the capability to track that based on the system that we use, but that is something that we could potentially explore in the future. Yeah.
But to that point, obviously, we will, if we transition to any kind of more email-centric process, we will be sharing that information on social media, posting it on our website, directing individuals to, make sure their settings are appropriate, or that they're making adjustments to their settings to make sure they're receiving our emails. So it is kind of on both ends that there'll probably need to be a fix.
Thank you for that question, though. Move on. Okay. So moving on to issue 4, which is relating to staff vacancies, CBA staff vacancies, specifically focusing on recruiting CPAs to apply for these supervising and investigative CPA positions. In their staff recommendation, they're asking if there's any legislative help that they can provide. The proposed CBA response states that the CBA is currently working with the Department of Consumer Affairs, who is in turn working with the California Department of Human Resources to address the pay differential language to allow internal candidates to retain the retention bonus when promoting to the supervising investigative CPA classification. There are established processes for modifications to a classification and compensation involving participation and agreement from the union and eventually the state personnel board. And the CBA will continue working with DCA for this study. So we're saying at this point we don't need any help from the legislature. Are there any comments or questions about issue 4?
Ms. Salata.
Thank you, Mr. Hemphill. I'm just wondering, do we have a timeline of, or an expectation of when that would be resolved?
Dominic.
Thank you. We've been working on, as it relates to the pay differential, I think we submitted a memo in 2022. So it's been an ongoing process since that time, but I do know it's being actively looked at again by Cal HR and DCA. And as for the pay raise, pay increase, that kind of part, it was in the bargaining unit contract last time. It is a carryover this time, and these are items that are really more Cal HR, SEIU, and the governor's office dependent.
Other comments? Seeing none, please continue on.
Okay, thank you, Chair 2. Issue 5 asks what the CBA is doing to improve its stakeholder satisfaction. The proposed CBA response discusses how we believe the root cause of the recent decline in our stakeholder satisfaction survey results stems from not having the CBA staff directly handle incoming calls. The CBA is exploring options now to move the answering of calls away from DCA's Consumer Information Center and back to the CBA. We believe this will go a long way in improving stakeholder satisfaction levels. Any comments or questions about issue 5?
Has the calls been directly to CBA in the past and it moved to DCA?
Yes, that was something that was transitioned, I believe, in 2019. And then when the pandemic came along, it necessitated us keeping it that way for, I think, longer than was originally planned. But we are exploring options to move that back in-house.
I think that would be really wise decision. So, All right, any other committee member? No, please continue.
Okay, thank you. Issue 6 relates to whether a retired status should be granted to a licensee whose practice has been permanently restricted by the CBA. And in the legislative staff recommendation, they asked how many licensees that could affect and why the retired designation is preferred. Our proposed response states that approximately 170 licensees would benefit from this proposed change, where an outstanding order of the board is preventing them from being able to place their license in a retired status. Currently, their only options are to allow their license to expire and eventually get canceled, or to voluntarily surrender their license. But having their license show as canceled or surrendered can have that negative connotation to it. Should the individual seek to reinstate their license to practice, the permanent restricted practice order would be reinstated. Any comments or questions for issue number 6?
I have a question. Those restricted license, it shows up on our website, right? So if they are in any procedural dealing with the board regarding enforcement issue, it will show that they are, because it is a negative connotation. If I am a public member, I look up their name as a CPA and there's some kind of restriction, it's a red flag for me.
Mm-hmm. Mr. Francella, do you want to address that?
Yeah, so there is when you search them up, there's a disciplinary record of the individual. And so by clicking on that, you'll be able to review information about a synopsis of the disciplinary order that was in effect, the fact that they were restricted, and then the actual disciplinary order itself is still linked there, so you can go and review that they have a permanently restricted license.
Yeah. And I remember watching the video, and the question was regarding why retired status. Through retired status, they can also unretire themselves too, and there's no negative connotation to having a retired status.
Yes, that is correct.
Great. Any other questions? Ms. Lavin?
I just wanted to add that I agree with the CBA response that's drafted here, and also agree with Ms. Tu that the canceled and surrendered language is negative, and as our CPAs who are in good standing wish to retire, I think they should be able to do that with a positive connotation to that. So I agree. Thank you.
All right. Comments? Seeing none, continue, please.
Okay, issue number 7 relates to whether accounting firms should be required to share peer review data so that the CBA can more closely monitor the peer review program. The proposed CBA response states how this change would improve CBA access to peer review information by requiring firms to participate in the AICPA web tool. AICPA is presently the only CBA-approved peer review program provider. This access would assist the CBA in its oversight responsibilities by allowing us to view certain documents and data and to independently verify if a firm has completed or received an extension for their mandated peer review. All of this is useful information to aid in licensing-related functions. So any comments about our response or questions? Issue 7.
The well-written response, for sure. Any comment? Seeing none, go ahead, continue, Mr. Hemphill.
Thank you. Issue 8 relates to the CBA's efforts to clarify its educational requirements. The staff recommendation just wants to know where we are in the process. So the proposed CBA response describes our Sure CPA project and its 4 phases. A summary of the recently completed information gathering phase is given, how the CBA collected input from students and faculty members through outreach events and an online survey, and the results of the information gathering. A list of proposed initiatives is given as part of the project's 2nd phase, such as updating outdated university course titles and modifying how we group the areas of study in the licensure requirements. So any comments or questions about our response to issue 8?
Any comments? Seeing none, please continue on.
All right, issue 9 relates to the uniform CPA examination and whether students have been negatively impacted by the transition to the new version. And in the the legislative staff recommendation, they want to know what we may have done to mitigate any potential negative effects. Our proposed response highlights the many actions the CBA took, the actions we took to amend the California Code of Regulations, and then the many things we did in our extensive communications campaign to raise awareness of the upcoming exam changes. Additionally, the CBA provided credit extensions for those currently testing during the transition time to allow them more time to complete all 4 sections of the CPA exam. So that's what's currently in the response. Since this is such a current and fluid topic, we would welcome any additional ideas of things to perhaps include in this response. So I throw that out to you all.
Anybody has any comments? I have to say though, David, that having been on this board for 4 years, I see that we on a regular basis update and really look at anything that needs to be improved so that it doesn't sneak up on us, it seems like. So kudos to staff for that. Ms. Rock?
Thank you. Mr. Hemphill, I didn't see in here any direct communications. Well, I see outreach events. I was just wondering, do we communicate with academia in terms of the actual professors communicating that to the students at all, or just through the outreach event?
We did discuss at the outreach events. There are a few professors that I maintain contact with from past events, and I did reach out to them last year as well, asking their students to fill out the online survey and kind of let them know that we were embarking on this project. So there was a little bit of that. That is something I could include in the response. That would be a good suggestion.
And just to follow that up, maybe also communicating with the accounting societies that are on the campuses as well, perhaps.
Okay. Thank you for that suggestion.
So when I was reading issue number 9, just the question, the way it's phrased, I actually thought that it related to the pass rates and whether the uniform exam led to lower or higher pass rates for candidates taking the exam first time or retakes. Has there just been 1 year of data that we can draw from?
It's been literally 2 to 3 months so far. So there's no data we can draw from at this point yet. Mm-hmm. But that will be something that I think everyone is very interested in seeing once that starts coming out.
I would tie that in with the mobility discussion too, because if pass rates do go up, then potentially that opens the number of candidates who are willing to sit for the exam.
Good point.
Mm-hmm.
Anybody else have any addition? Okay, seeing none, Mr. Hemphill, continue.
Okay, let's move on to issue 10, related to whether accounting firm owners should be required to have the same responsibility as licensees who are authorized to sign reports on attest engagements, and why the change is needed from an enforcement perspective. The proposed CBA response states that in some instances, none of the owners of a firm have the attest authority. The statutory changes the CBA is pursuing would ensure that ownership is liable to the same degree as the accounting firm, as well as any signer the owner is authorized to do the work. This solution would increase consumer protection and ensure investigations can be conducted effectively. Also, the proposal would require a firm to provide the signer of the attest report with the work papers necessary to allow them to effectively answer questions and defend their work if they are no longer with the accounting firm, removing any unnecessary barriers to the CBA's investigation. Any feedback or questions regarding issue 10?
Anybody? I have a question. Does the accounting firm have to have somebody for the testing ability on as a staff member, or can they bring in a consultant?
I'll defer to Mr. Frenzel on this.
In this particular scenario that we're looking at here, it's presuming that the individual or the firm has a staff member who they've assigned or authorized to sign the report on behalf of the firm, and that individual is working for the firm.
All right, seeing no further comment, please continue.
Okay, on to issue 11, which is relating to workforce development, and if any statutory changes are needed to help sustain the pipeline of CPAs into the accounting profession. The proposed CBA response states how there has been a decline in the number of individuals entering the CPA profession over the last several years, and what is being discussed at the national and state levels. Nationally, NASBA created a professional licensure task force last fall, and in California, CalCPA recently formed the California Pipeline Advisory Group, or CPAG, the purpose of which is to assist in the evaluation of potential changes to the CPA licensure framework in California and how proposed changes may impact candidates in the state. The CBA is actively monitoring and participating in these discussions, but a solution will not be reached in time for this year's sunset legislation package. So in our response, we do state our desire to possibly readdress this issue with the legislature in the near future. And again, with this topic being, the pipeline, as we discussed in the previous meeting, being such an important topic, I would encourage any potential other items to include in our response if you have any suggestions for us on that. So I turn it over to you for that for issue 11.
Ms. Batcher?
With this pipeline problem, it seems like the major driver is the 30-semester unit. But when these surveys were taken with students, was that the main issue? Because there's other variables probably impacting the pipeline, just like the caller had stated at last meeting. And those issues that caller brought up was pretty spot on. The cost of living in California is quite high. And in other professions, we'll say like RNs, doctors, engineers, lawyers, they all start off way higher in pay than our CPA candidates do. So are those issues being addressed?
Well, interestingly, in the survey that we did, it was about 50%, so only about half said that they needed to go back to school after they were theoretically done, to get those extra 30 units. So that didn't appear to be as big of an issue as some of the others. But Mr. Franzella, do you want to take it from there?
Please, Mr. Ranzel.
Thank you. So I would say in relation to the response to this question, the focus is those items that the board has some level of control over in the regulatory environment. A lot of what the caller had brought up were things that I believe the AICPA, CalCPA are focused on in terms of the image of the CPA profession, pay scale, salary, encouraging people to want to enter the profession from that kind of end. And the board has a role in that, and we try our best to talk about the image and or the brand and the image of the CPA. But I think our focus is on those things that are kind of the requirements to enter the profession. So that's why ours is kind of focused in the 150 semester units, the discussion around the clarity of the educational requirements and the like, as opposed to some of the other pieces that the caller had talked about. But those are being discussed nationally and are things that I believe the AICPA and other state societies are working with membership on, because those are drivers. And I think as regulators, we know that as well, but we don't get to set the pay scale through regulation and things of those nature. So there's some things that are kind of outside of our control, and we try to focus ours on those things that we could potentially make improvements on or provide solutions to.
I have another comment also. We have 80 hours every 2 years of continuing education, and that's quite extensive. Needed, but extensive. In other professions, and I'm sure there's some attorneys in this room, just using that profession as an example. It's every 3 years, I think it's 24 hours. So what makes, that's a huge difference. And these courses that we have to take they're not cheap, they're quite expensive. And so that's something that I would think the Board of Accountancy controls in terms of the continuing education requirement as well. Maybe that could be looked at and addressed. Thoughts?
I would actually second that. Many of my anecdotal discussion with CPA, they said, Ian, the one thing you can help us out is to reduce some of the educational requirement. And I thought that was pretty much set in stone, but it is something that we possibly bring up for future discussion.
I think that is a topic that's worthy of discussion, but that is not, the question that's being asked in issue 11, which is specific to the pipeline. So it's getting people into the profession,
Ms. Batchelor, maybe we can put that in future discussion for future board meetings. I see Deanna's making notes, so she's on it. All right, Ms. Salazar.
Thank you. I just think in response to the questions, maybe we could just add, and you might have already made notes, a little bit of clarity. There is mention of the other groups doing other things, but just maybe a little bit more clarity for the legislators that will read this and the public that will read it to kind of explain what Dominic clarified, which is, we have a role. There is a larger national discussion, and our focus is on the areas in which our board is authorized to regulate and provide impact. And where possible, we support the activities of our partner organizations with their efforts, and that might make it a little bit more inclusive as well. So thank you so much for bringing that up, Member Batchelor.
I have another comment. Oh, I'm sorry, Ms. Lotta. I have another comment too. Not only, when students are looking to get, you talked about getting into the profession. Well, people do their research in terms of what does it take to get into this profession, just like any other profession. I have a colleague, it's an acquaintance of mine that's a doctor. Prior to her becoming a surgeon, deciding to be a doctor and be a surgeon, she looked at it at the CPA exam. She wanted to be a CPA initially. And then when she looked at the requirements that it took to be a CPA, she says, well, I might as well be a doctor. And now she's a successful OBGYN surgeon. And she's doing pretty well with that. But several things are looked at, not just the education piece. That's what I'm driving at.
Ms. Latta?
I'll get to my comment in a second. I think Ms. Batchelor raises an excellent point that individuals looking to enter professional fields do tend to be forward-looking and strategic about their choices, and they are looking at what their life might look like with their salary and, the requirements to get whatever certifications or licenses that they're seeking. So I think that is something to note, that it does change their decisions or perceptions in the beginning of them deciding to enter the pipeline. So I thought that was a great insight. Moving on to my question in regards to item 11, are we looking at integrating or having better collaboration with the universities in terms of CPA review course materials? Because usually you have to take an independent review course to prepare for the exam, and getting your 150 units isn't sufficient to prepare for that. Is that something that's up for discussion? Because I think that's something that could improve the pipeline.
I think that's something that should be considered as part of the SURE CPA project, because that goes hand in hand with that. And that's something that, Ms. Center and I we're kind of discussing things with Cal CPA's Accounting Education Committee and things like that. So, I think that's something that can be discussed moving forward. Thank you.
Brancella, do you want to add any more? Nope. Oh, you're good. Okay. It looks like we have no more comments, so please continue.
Okay, hang on. Let me jot down Ms. Lotta's comment so I don't forget it. Great. All right. Thank you for all the feedback, everyone. Let's move to issue 12. All right, this is a pretty easy one. It's related to whether the CBA needs any technical code cleanup. So our response states our desire to amend Business and Professions Code sections 5093 and 5094 to change a regional or national accrediting agency to just an accrediting agency, which would bring California statutes into alignment with the revised federal code provisions. Any comments or questions about issue 12?
This is the easy one.
Yeah, that was pretty easy.
Doesn't look like there's any comments, so you can move on.
All right, so the final issue, number 13, asks the big question if the CBA should continue to regulate the licensing of CPAs and the registration of accounting firms. And our proposed response is yes. We state the vital role that the CBA plays in protecting consumers by ensuring only qualified licensees practice public accountancy in accordance with established professional standards. And the CBA respectfully requests that the legislature extend our sunset date so we may continue our mission to protect consumers. Any feedback on that one?
Other than, whoa.
Let's go.
Yeah. All right. Nope. Continue on. I think that might be your last item.
Yeah, so those are the 13. So thank you so much for all of your feedback. The committees will then review these responses to the issues, and they will determine what, if any, of the CBA's legislative proposals will be included in our sunset legislation, which is Assembly Bill 3251. So staff recommends that the LC approve the draft responses as contained in the attachments and authorize the CBA president to make any final edits if needed. I'm happy to answer any other questions you may have, and I'll hand it back to Chair 2 for a possible motion.
Any addition, Ms. Latta?
I have one final comment, circling back to issue number 9 and the what are we doing to mitigate any negative consequences from the new uniform CPA examination. I was just wondering, I didn't see anything in there relating to communication directly with any accounting firms. So I was just, are we doing that? And if not, is that something we can do, is at least communicate directly with the big 4 firms and any large regional firms for California, if that could be something to help in terms of communicating to our candidates.
So what are you suggesting that how do we communicate, or what's the messaging with them?
Let me see, let me get back down to it. I guess just general communications in regards to, I believe one of our mitigations is that we are communicating to the students through just various things, outreach events. I was just saying it's another mode of directly communicating to the candidates, because the new staff and firms are the ones likely sitting for the exam. Right. And I mean, I just recall in my firm, I had to do all that research on my own and I didn't get a lot of firm support. So I'm just saying, if we notify our larger firms that there's communication that they can disseminate or direct them directly to our website, just a better way to make sure the information is getting out there to our professionals who are already in the field.
Oh, that's good. That is a valid point, because a lot of the people taking the exam are potentially already working at firms. So yeah, we will explore that. Thank you.
All right, any other comments? Seeing none. In Sacramento, do we have any public comments? Oh, motion first. Do we have a motion? Ms. Salazar?
I'd like to make a motion to approve the responses to the Sunset Review background paper questions and delegate authority to the president for non-substantive edits.
Thank you for that motion. Do I see a second? Ms. Salazar?
I second that motion.
All right, we have now a motion on the floor. Any discussion from the board members, committee members, I should say? Now we are open to the Sacramento location public comment. Seeing none, Ms. Moderator, could you open up WebEx for comments?
Yes, this is the moderator. WebEx is open. The instructions are on the screen for your reference. If you're logged in and would like to participate, click that question mark inside of the square, typically bottom right corner of your WebEx screen, and type the word comment in the text field and make sure it goes to all panelists before you click send. If you are calling in, press *3 from your phone to raise your virtual hand. At this time, I see no requests. Would you like me to close the Q&A?
Yes, Ms. Moderator. Thank you so much for that. All right, so we now have a motion on the floor and second. Ms. Reed, can you call the roll?
Yen Tu? Yes. Katrina Salazar? Yes. Tony Lin?
Yes.
Christian Lotta?
Yes.
Nancy Dong?
Yes.
And Patricia Batchelor?
Yes.
The motion carries.
Thank you, Ms. Reed. Now we go to item number 5, review and consideration of possible position on legislation. And Mr. Hemhill, you still here for that?
I am
Item
still
number
here. Thank you. So we are now going to discuss Assembly Bill 3258, which we just mentioned is the CBA's sunset legislation. It presently has placeholder language about removing obsolete provisions from 2011, but it will be amended to potentially include the CBA's legislative proposals that were included as new issues in its sunset review report, which are the elimination of the mobility stakeholder group, allowing a licensee with a permanent practice restriction to obtain a retired status license, remove references that require physical mailings to and from the CBA, updating references for educational accreditation agencies consistent with the Code of Federal Regulations, providing clarity to ensure access to peer review documentation, and addressing the issue of accounting firms with ownership comprised solely of licensees who are not authorized to sign attest engagements. So those are what we're proposing. They will hear everything in an Assembly Business and Professions Committee hearing coming up on April 23rd. So that is the next landmark on the path for this legislation. Staff recommends the Legislative Committee make a motion to take a support position on AB 3251 to continue to advance this measure as a vehicle to be used for the CBA's proposals. I'll turn it back to Chair 2 for a possible motion, and I'm available to answer any questions members may have.
Do I see a motion from the committee members? Do you have any questions or comment, maybe first? Can the chair make a motion? Yeah, I will make a motion to support staff recommendations on the support on this bill. I have Ms. Salazar seconding the motion.
Thank you.
Any further discussion? If no further discussion, I would like to invite the public for any comments in Sacramento. Seeing none, please, moderator, can you open up WebEx?
This is the moderator. The Q&A is open. The instructions will be on the screen shortly. They are on the screen. If you would like to participate, click that question mark, type comments, send it to all panelists. If you're calling in, press *3 from your phone to raise your virtual hand. At this time, I see no requests. Would you like me to close the Q&A?
Yes, please, moderator. Thank you very much. All right, we have a motion on the floor. Ms. Reed, can you call the roll?
Patricia Batchelor? Yes. Nancy Dong?
Yes.
Christian Lotta?
Yes.
Tony Lin?
Yes.
Katrina Salazar?
Yes.
And Yen Tu?
Yes.
The motion carries.
All right, thank you, Ms. Reed. All right, we are now to item number 6, review and consideration of possible positions on legislation the California Board of Accountancy is monitoring.
Very
Mr.
good.
Hemhill again.
Thank you again, Chair 2. So there are 11 bills working their way through the legislature that CBA staff are currently monitoring under this agenda item. Since it is still early in the session, many of these measures are not fully developed. Some are existing only as spot bills preparing to be amended. As bills continue moving through the legislature and evolve into legislation that may impact the practice of public accountancy or have an impact on the operations of the CBA, staff will prepare an analysis and the bill will be presented at a subsequent CBA meeting. That concludes my presentation, and I will now hand it back over to Chair 2.
Anybody have any comments or questions, first of all, on the committee? Seeing none, and we don't need a motion for this one. So with that, the committee's adjourned.
Nope.
Oh, sorry, forgot. Does the public in Sacramento have any comments? Seeing none, Ms. Moderator, could you open public comment on WebEx?
Yes, the Q&A is now open. The instructions are on the screen for your reference. If you would like to participate, click that question mark, type comment, send it to all panelists. If you're calling in, *3 to raise your virtual hand. At this time, I see no requests. Would you like me to close the Q&A feature?
Yes, please, moderator. Thank you for all your help today. And with that, we can adjourn the committee. Thank you all.